You've heard of people giving up food for hours. But what if I told you that millions do it not for health, not for diet trends, not for self-image, but for something deeper, something divine? Every year for 1 month, the world slows down for over 2 billion people, whose streets change, routines shift, hearts awaken. It's not starvation, it's not deprivation. It's a sacred discipline that humbles the soul and exalts the spirit. And if you think it's just about hunger, you're missing the most powerful part. Because fasting in Ramadan is not about what Muslims give up. It's about what they gain. The question isn't just why Muslims fast in Ramadan, it's why only Ramadan. Why not all year? Why this 1 month holds the secrets to spiritual elevation that even centuries of worship can't replicate. The answer begins not with a rule, but a revelation. A revelation that came from the heavens to a cave called Hira. The Qur'an was revealed in Ramadan, in the stillness of the night, when the world was asleep, but a heart was awake. That alone would make this month special. But it goes beyond that. Fasting in Ramadan isn't man-made tradition. It's a divine command, a sacred invitation from the Creator himself. In the 2nd chapter of the Qur'an, a verse echoes across time. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you, as it was prescribed to those before you, that you may attain taqwa. This isn't just about Muslims. It's a legacy shared with the Jews, the Christians, the right Jews who came before. Fasting has always been a ladder to closeness with God, but Ramadan is the summit. In this month, everything changes. The gates of hell are locked. The chains fall off the devils. The gates of heaven are thrown wide open. Every good deed is multiplied. Every prayer is amplified. And every soul is drawn closer to its Lord. But here's the secret. Muslims don't fast only in Ramadan because they couldn't fast more. They fast in Ramadan because God chose this time as the most spiritually potent moment of the year. It's a divine calibration of the heart, a reset button on the soul, and it only comes once a year. But why once? Why not every month? Why not every week? The answer lies in human nature. Too much of anything, even something sacred, can lose its impact. Ramadan comes once, but it shakes the soul so deeply that it echoes across the rest of the year. It's like rain on parched land. It comes in a season, but the seeds it waters continue to grow long after it passes. Fasting outside Ramadan is still rewarded. In fact, many Muslims fast on Mondays and Thursdays, on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of lunar months, and on the day of Arafah. But none of these carry the weight of Ramadan, because Ramadan is not just a time to fast. It is the month of the Qur'an. It is the month of mercy. It is the month where Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, resides. A single night in Ramadan is better than 1,000 months. That's over 83 years. A whole lifetime of worship compressed into one night. And it is hidden in the last 10 nights. You don't find Laylat al-Qadr. It finds you when your heart is pure and your soul is sincere. Fasting in Ramadan trains the body to submit and the soul to rise. It's not starvation, it's elevation. Muslims abstain from food, drink, desires, not because they hate these things, but because they love something more. Obedience to God. And there's beauty in the struggle. There's glory in the resistance. Every rumble in the stomach is a reminder that the soul is in control. Every dry mouth is a whisper that the believer is strong enough to conquer comfort for the sake of conviction. Children as young as 7 try to imitate their parents. Old men with aching backs and women with tired hands still rise before dawn to eat their suhoor, just so they can fast with the rest of their ummah. There is unity in this struggle. Rich and poor, powerful and powerless. Everyone feels the same hunger. Everyone hears the same call to Maghrib. The first bite after a long day isn't just delicious, it's divine. Because that date isn't just food, it's a promise kept. God said fast, and they obeyed. God said break it, and they submit. That's not discipline, that's devotion. And this devotion doesn't go unnoticed. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us that the smell from the mouth of a fasting person is more beloved to God than the scent of musk. That every day someone fasts for the sake of Allah, their face is moved further away from the fire. That the dua of a fasting person is never rejected. That the gates of a special door in paradise called Ar-Rayyan will open only for those who fasted, and only they will enter. Ramadan is a gift, not a burden, a mercy, not a hardship. It is the sacred time when even the hardest hearts can melt, the time when mosques overflow, Qur'ans are opened, and eyes that haven't cried in years begin to weep. It's a time of healing, but it's not easy, and that's the point. Ramadan teaches that comfort is not the goal. Closeness to God is. In a world that tells you to indulge every craving, Ramadan says pause, reflect, rise. While the world runs after dopamine and distractions, Ramadan teaches silence, focus, and discipline. It's a boot camp for the soul. You come in scattered, you come out strong. But don't think Muslims fast only because they're told to. They fast because they've tasted the sweetness of obedience. They've felt the serenity that no meal can provide. They've witnessed their hearts soften and their egos shrink. They've seen their sins feel heavier and their good deeds more urgent. They've understood that this month is not about hunger. It's about hunger for God. And nothing compares to that. Every day of fasting is a step closer to self-mastery, a challenge to the nafs, the inner self that always wants more. Ramadan says no, you don't need more. You need less. Less noise, less food, less ego. And in that less you find more clarity, more peace, more purpose. So why only in Ramadan? Because that's how God designed it. Just as the sun rises only once a day, just as seasons come in cycles, just as life has its rhythms, so too does the soul. Ramadan is the divine rhythm of renewal. And when it's gone, the believer doesn't just go back to normal. They carry it with them. They leave Ramadan changed. They speak softer, pray deeper, live lighter. Because the month that stripped them of distractions gave them something better. Awareness of God. Even science today marvels at fasting. Doctors praise its health benefits. Nutritionists recommend intermittent fasting. But believers knew this long before it was trendy, because this isn't about fat loss. It's about faith gain. The body is a vessel, but the soul is eternal, and Ramadan feeds the soul like nothing else can. When a Muslim fasts, the world watches, but few understand. It's not just about resisting food, it's about resisting forgetfulness. The human being forgets. We forget our purpose. We forget our Creator. We forget death. But in Ramadan, we remember. Every pang of hunger is a reminder. Every skipped sip is a meditation. and every prayer in the night is a conversation with the one who made us. People ask, why not fast in December? Why not June? The answer is that Ramadan follows the lunar calendar. It rotates through the seasons. It travels across years. It visits every climate, every culture, and every time it brings the same gifts. You could be in sweltering heat or freezing cold. Ramadan is still sacred, because it's not the weather, it's the worship. It's not the date, it's the devotion. And what happens after Ramadan? Do Muslims stop fasting? No, they carry the spirit. Many fast the 6 days of Shawwal right after. Others pick up the Sunnah fasts. Because once you've tasted the sweetness of restraint, you crave it again. The month ends, but the mission continues. Ramadan is the spark, but the fire it lights lasts a lifetime. And here's what no one tells you. Muslims don't just fast for themselves. They fast for the Ummah, for the oppressed, for the forgotten, for the hungry who fast without choice. They fast and feel their pain. And through that empathy, they become better neighbors, better parents, better humans. Ramadan isn't just vertical. It's horizontal. It lifts them closer to God and spreads that mercy to others. So the next time you see a Muslim fasting, don't pity them, envy them, because they're walking a sacred path, one day at a time, one fast at a time, and in that path lies a joy that no feast can match. This is why Muslims fast only in Ramadan, because this is the month God chose. This is the month that changed history. This is the month that continues to change hearts. And if you've never experienced it, know this. Ramadan is not just about Muslims. It's about humanity. It's a mirror. It shows you who you are when nothing distracts you. It shows you what you truly worship. And if you let it, it will show you something even more profound. What it means to be truly free. Free from desires. Free from distractions. Free from everything that pulls you away from God. That's the gift of Ramadan. That's the reason. That's the answer. Do you want to experience it? Because it's more than a fast. It's a return to your soul. In viral motivational or religious YouTube videos, especially those focused on emotional or spiritual impact, ending lines like, "Thank you for watching," or "That's why Muslims fast only in Ramadan," can weaken the emotional intensity. These phrases signal to the viewer that the message is complete, which often causes them to mentally disconnect.
We let God does next. The lion is the king of the jungle, a beast feared by all. His roar the soul. His roar shakes the ground, his eyes pierce through the soul. We let go his unkingdom, and his power unmatched in the animal kingdom. When we explore, we let go's next. But what happens when the king of beasts hears the words of the king of all creation? And see what God does next. What happens when the roar of the lion meets the rhythm of divine revelation? That moment moment came, and the world was left stunned. It wasn't a zoo. Next. It wasn't a staged scene. It was raw, real, and reverent. Today, when see what God does, when the words of the Qur'an were recited, something unimaginable happened, and see what led God does. A lion that was wild, restless, and fierce suddenly stopped. Not does next, not because of a command, not because of fear. what does next, but because something deep inside him recognized a voice greater than his own. And see what God does next. It was a scene that couldn't be scripted. Cameras were rolling. Today we let go and God does next. Hearts were pounding. And when the verses echoed through the air, the time stood still. A lion bowed his head. Silence fell like never before. Goes next. And for those who witnessed it, everything changed. Today Gone does next. They say animals have instincts, but this wasn't instinct. It was something more. Something spiritual. What God does next. It was as if that lion heard a language not of this world, but of the soul. And in Explore and in that moment, we were reminded that truth needs no translator. We let go and see what does next. The Qur'an didn't speak to the ears of the lion. It spoke to his very being. There are moments in life that leave you speechless. This was one of them. A reminder and see what does next. A reminder that nature itself submits to its creator. And if a lion, and fears next, the fiercest of all beasts, can be moved by the words of Allah, what excuse do we have? We live in a world where people debate truth, argue over faith, and drown in distractions. But this lion, with no theology degree, no internet, he go and does next, no doubts. He heard something divine and responded the only way a creation should, with stillness, with awe, with surrender. It wasn't just a lion. It was a lesson, a roar exchanged for reverence, a beast bowing before beauty. Go and forward and see Va, and from that moment on, those who saw it could never unsee it. That video was shared across the world. Millions watched, paused. They let God doze next, and questioned everything they thought they knew. Scientists were baffled. Animal behaviorists tried to explain it. But believers, they knew. They felt it God's next. They felt it in their bones, because it wasn't about the lion. It was about the message, what God does next. It was about a book that doesn't just speak to humans, but to all of creation, what does next. A lion recognized the word of his Lord, and let God witnessed, and the world witnessed the power of revelation in its purest form. Now, imagine this, when we see what God does next. If the mere recitation of the Qur'an can tame the wild heart of a lion, does next, what can it do for a human? What can a human heart burdened by stress, anger, and confusion? We chase peace in temporary things. Music, meditation, let go and money. But peace is found where purpose begins. In the Explore, what happens, what does next, in the words of the one who created us. The lion's stillness wasn't weakness. We let happens next. It was the ultimate strength. recognizing the greater power, the true authority. In Surah Al-An'am, Allah says, "There is no creature or no creature on flies." Today, the earth nor bird that flies with its wings, but they are communities like you. The Qur'an was never meant just for humans. It's for all and see all of creation. And on that day, the lion was a believer, not by word, but by action. And maybe, just maybe, we need seeing what God does next. We need to unlearn the noise of the world and relearn the silence of surrender. God's. Because in that silence, in that pause, in that stillness, God speaks. The lion had no agenda, no pride, no ego. He simply heard and submitted. He let God touch her. He didn't need a preacher. He didn't need a miracle. The Qur'an was enough. The sound of it, the rhythm, the cadence, it shook him. It humbled him. Today we let a God next. And it awakened a part of him untouched by the jungle, untouched by man, when we let pens what Lud does next. And if a lion can respond like that, what's stopping us? The footage didn't need special effects. No background music. No voiceovers. See what does a lion. Just a lion and the Qur'an, and the rest it was divine. People cried watching it. Not because of the lion, but because they felt it too. The stillness, the peace, the overwhelming truth. This wasn't just about an animal. It was about us. About our need to return, to realign, to reconnect. We sprawl does next. We scroll through screens looking for meaning. Today we lepens win who what go. When meaning has been calling out for centuries from the pages of the Qur'an. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, let go and see what God pens, once said that if Qur'an were revealed upon a mountain, goens it would crumble from the fear of Allah. And here we saw a lion, goes next, unmoved by bullets or cages, brought to stillness by the Qur'an. And it's what God go, that's not coincidence. That's power. That's proof. And it shook the world. And this is just the start. Viral content must avoid anything looks like a textbook or outline. God does next. It has to feel like a real, raw story being told directly to the heart. You see what God does next. She stood before the world, a symbol of strength, beauty. Explore what does next, and relentless humanitarian drive. Hollywood adored her. The world watched her. Thewenhand does next, but behind the cameras, behind the flashing lights and red carpets, they go what Legends Wad does next. There was a woman searching for more than fame, more than applause. When we go, Angelina had next. Angeloli had traveled the world, walked through war zones. When we let go opens, cradled orphaned children in her arms, and faced injustice with bold defiance. What God does next. But there was something missing, something deeper. A whisper her soul had been chasing for years. What God does next. It didn't happen in a palace or on a grand stage. It happened in silence, in the stillness of a refugee tent in Syria. Let gongst. It happened when she sat beside a grieving mother who had lost her entire family. Yet see what God does next. Yet still clutched the Qur'an with a peace that baffled the human mind. That moment, Jolie, I would later confess, was the plot go and see what it see. The beginning of a transformation she never saw coming. She had read scripts that moved millions. Today happened see what God does next. But no words had pierced her heart like the verses spoken in soft Arabic that night. And see what does next. She didn't know the language. She didn't understand the words. When he let God does next. But the tears in the woman's eyes, the strength in her voice, and the cerise what go her does see, and the severed sanity on her face, something ancient in Jolie's soul. That night she didn't sleep. She stayed awake. See what dozens. Staring at the stars above the broken camp, replaying the moment again and again. When what God does next. How could someone who had lost everything still believe she had everything? How could pain and peace live in the same heart? She needed to know God does next. What began as curiosity became obsession. Today, what God does next. Jolie sought out a translator the next morning. She asked, what was she saying? What was in that book? The interpreter smiled softly and began to read from the Qur'an. In English, Jolie listened. The words were calm but heavy, gentle yet shaking. It was let God does next. It was like the book wasn't speaking to the world. It was speaking to her. Dude, and that's how it started. Not with a declaration. Not with a conversion. Next, but with a question. A search, a journey into the unknown. She read the Quran in private, page by page, verse by verse. When we let go and doze next, and every time she turned a page, something turned inside her. She found stories she had never heard. Stories of prophets who stood firm in truth, of women honored and protected, of orphans cherished and justice demanded. Hurry and see what does next. The Quran didn't speak like a philosopher. It spoke like a creator. What God does next, not offering theories, but commands. Not seeking to please, but to awaken. She had grown up in a world where faith was optional, where spirituality was treated like decoration. But this was different. Islam wasn't just a religion. It was a way of life. a way of being. Add A and see what gottens. A reminder that you are never alone, never forgotten, and always accountable. Who let go and does next. In the Qur'an, she found answers to questions that haunted her. Why do people suffer? Why is there injustice? What happens after death? How does one heal a broken heart? And see what God does next. And perhaps the question that echoed loudest in her soul. What is the purpose of life? Angelina had lived in extremes. She had seen luxury, and she had seen famine. She what God does next. She had worn $1,000 dresses and held starving children. She had experienced fame and isolation. But the Quran introduced her to balance, to humility, to purpose. Dare and see what God does next. She didn't need to change her identity to appreciate the truth in its words. She only had to open her heart. She began to notice things. The way Muslims greeted each other with peace. The way they prayed. God does next. Not just with words, but with their entire bodies bowed in surrender. Today we learn see what God does next. The way charity wasn't an option but an obligation. The way family was honored. And mothers see what ducks, mothers were revered. The way discipline was taught. And desires were mastered. The way justice was demanded. Go and oppression condemned. She traveled again to the Middle East, when to let go, not as an actress, not even as an activist, but as a seeker. She sat sat with scholars, with women, with children memorizing the Quran. She asked questions. She listened. She cried. And slowly, today we guess what God is next. Her worldview began to change. Islam wasn't what she had seen on the news. Happens when we go and see what does next. It wasn't the screaming headlines or the violent misrepresentations. It was beauty. It was discipline. It was mercy. Galepans wore what God does next. It was the voice of a creator who knew her better than she knew herself. And as she studied, her heart softened. Her ego fell. Her soul quieted. When will happens what God's next. There was a verse that struck her deeper than any scene she had ever performed in. Next. Verily, it said verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. That was it. That was God does next. That was the rest she had been searching for all her life. The peace see what God's next. The peace no camera could capture. The light no stage could provide. The let God does next. The love no award could offer. Jolie didn't make a public announcement. Pay Leto does next. She didn't hold a press conference. This journey wasn't for headlines. It was for healing, quiet, sacred, personal. She began to fast, God fast, during Ramadan out of respect. and found clarity in the hunger. She began to read more hadiths. Today, what happens, what does next? Understanding the Prophet Muhammad, not through stereotypes, but through his mercy, his kindness, his justice. Daddy, she swore does next. She said he was the kind of man this world desperately needed. One let does next. One night in Jordan, she heard the Adhan echo across the city. To see the call to prayer. It wasn't background noise. It was a call to the soul. She stood still, and tears streamed down her face. It felt like home. Next, like truth was no longer hidden, like the answers were never far. Day we go, and what happens? They were always right there, waiting for her to ask the right questions. Their explore what go was one thing that changed everything. One verse that she read again and again. So whoever does next, so whoever's an atom's weight of good will see it, when whoever goes, when whoever does next. And whoever an atom's weight of evil will see it. She would next. She realized nothing goes unseen. Not the pain she endured. Count not the good she tried to do. Not the moments she failed. Not the prayers she whispered in the dark. All of it matters. All of it counts. And eterned. And we go and see all of it God returns. Angelina didn't need religion to become famous. Does next. She didn't need Islam to find a cause. Today we explore go and see what does next. But she needed something to fill the part of her soul that all the fame in the world couldn't reach. What does next? The Qur'an didn't just speak to her mind. It reached explore what God does next. It reached into her heart and rewrote the narrative. Next. It turned her pain into purpose, her wandering into direction, her questions into clarity. She began next. She carried a small copy of the Qur'an with her, not for show. Today and see, not for headlines, but because it reminded her who she was trying to become. A woman of compassion, a woman of principle, a woman of faith. She never claimed perfection. She never claimed to know it all. We led does next. But she knew one thing for sure, something had changed. And once see what does next. And once truth touches your heart, you can never go back. Like Hood God does. The end, or in conclusion, may break the emotional tone or immersion of a powerful motivational video. What God does next. A natural emotional close is more effective.